Charles Upton was the youngest member of the Beat generation of poets. Keep watching to learn what he believes are the secrets of great poetry.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download a free PDF copy of issue number 8 of the New Thinking Aloud magazine or order a beautiful printed copy. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we'll be exploring the quest for meaning in poetry. My guest is Charles Upton. His first 2 books of poetry, Panic Grass in 1968 and Time Raid in 1969, were published by City Lights in San Francisco, known for publishing the works of the great Beat poets, and he was considered, as a high school student back then, the youngest member of the Beat generation of poets. He subsequently became engaged in metaphysics and the traditionalist movement and is author of many books, including Hammering Hot Iron, a spiritual critique of Bly's Iron John, Folk Metaphysics, Mystical Meanings in Traditional Folk Songs and Spirituals, Knowings in the Arts of Metaphysics, Cosmology, and the Spiritual Path, The Science of the Greater Jihad, The System of the Antichrist, Truth and Falsehood in Postmodernism and the New Age, Vectors of the Counter-Initiation, the Course and Destiny of Inverted Spirituality, The Alien Disclosure Deception, the Metaphysics of Social Engineering, and the Way Forward for Perennialism after the Antinomianism of Fritjof Schuon. Charles lives in Lexington, Kentucky, and now I'll switch over to the internet video. Welcome, Charles. It's a pleasure once again to be with you.
Well, thank you, and it's likewise here. You are a congenial host, and you don't know how to draw things out of your guests that need to be drawn.
This is going to be an interesting interview because I know you've had your ups and downs with regard to poetry. One time you were considered the young genius of the Beat movement, and then you deliberately, as I recall, gave it all up.
Well, you could say you gave it up, which makes it sound noble and self-sacrificial, but there's another way of saying I chickened out. That's the other way to look at it. It's funny. It's funny with poetry. My mentor as a poet, a Beat generation poet, Lou Welch, who meant a great deal to me and taught me a huge amount. But what happened to him is he was an alcoholic suicide. And it was very clear that this was woven into his poetic self. It was part of his poetic self. And, I had people afterwards who knew I was his student, and this is getting a little dark, but in Bay Area, Bolinas, Bolinas, the poet town out by the ocean. And there was a lady once who was essentially saying, well, Lou Welch committed suicide, you should follow, tempting me to commit suicide, because the poets are supposed to die young. Lou died at 44, and that isn't really young. You have to die at, 23 if you really want to die young. But I decided not to do that. It wasn't just I pull out of this consciously to save my life. Otherwise, I'll get on that poet dies young track. But maybe that had something to do with it. But the thing is, let's get to meaning. This is supposed to be about poetry and meaning. Lou Welch said part of his job as a poet was to become the kind of person who has something to say worth listening to. And, if I felt I didn't have anything to say, I had something big to say when I wrote my poem Panic Grass, which was a short epic poem published by Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and you could call it the major poem outside of song lyrics of the 60s. But, it wasn't universally recognized as that because most of the poetic effort and genius of the 60s went into song lyrics. So there's, and then some poets were still writing poems. And then there are better known poets like Allen Ginsberg who were writing at the same time. And so they got that attention. But, for somebody who came right out of the 60s and wrote about it, and it was basically a poem about the end of America. And it's a central work, but we don't have a literary world that could recognize it or even take the time to criticize it and dismiss it. You know what I mean? It just, poof, went into the void. Because after the Beat Generation and after the second wind of the Beat Generation in the 60s, where they and the rock bands became spokespeople for maybe 2 generations. And they were saying the huge changes are going on. What's going on now? And you wait for the next song from the Beatles or the Stones or the band or the Who that'll say what's going on now. And then during the student demonstrations, 4 people were killed in Kent State. And the Crosby, Stills and Nash come out with a song Ohio. 4 dead in Ohio right away. So it was like art and life were like that, as you almost never have. It was just. That never happens, but it did. And then after that, it sank, it disappeared. Meaning disappeared. Or meaning in the form of words, of poetry, was gone. And it was an incredibly precipitous fall. So if you express more than you have to express, if you try to drum up meaning or make something interesting just out of words and your ego, right? I'm a poet. I can do words. Let's do some interesting words. If you do that and there's not enough meaning backing it up, you go into debt. You go into debt to existence itself. And this is why a lot of poets historically, and at least in the modernist period, ended up dying young, killing themselves one way or another because they couldn't pay it back, or they had to pay with their lives because they were in debt. So it's a dangerous art, because if you don't take it seriously, then what are you doing with it? You're just spinning your wheels and wasting your time and everybody else's. But if you do take it seriously, wow, what if something comes to you that is bigger than you are? That's the other thing. What if some conception, some vision, some knowledge comes to you that you didn't earn, that's bigger than you are, and you expressed it, and maybe you expressed it very well, and then suddenly you've got something you have to live up to. And how are you going to do that? It just came through you. Okay, this is called Sporting Life by San Francisco poet Jack Spicer, who died, I think, at 40. So he says, the trouble with comparing a poet with a radio is that radios don't develop scar tissue. The tubes burn out, or with a transistor, which most souls are, the battery or diagram burns out, replaceable or not replaceable, but not like that punch-drunk fighter in a bar. The poet takes too many messages. The right to the ear that floored him in New Jersey, the right to say that he stood 6 rounds with a champion. then they sell beer or go on sporting commissions, or if the scar tissue is too heavy, demonstrate in a bar where the invisible champions might not have hit him. Too many of them. The poet is a radio. The poet is a liar. The poet is a counter-punching radio. And those messages, God would not damn them, do not even know they are champions. So, comparing a poet to an old, burned-out prize fighter, who's been hit too many times in the ear. He's got a cauliflower ear, So, but meaning. The problem is meaning has become gauche to a lot of people. There's a general cynicism. There's a belief life is random. Or some other such thing, or there is no meaning, but I'll make it be all by myself without there any meaning in the universe to back me up or for me to respond to. I'll just make meaning. And what am I going to make it out of? Well, my ego. What else do I got to make meaning out of? And that's not going to mean anything to anybody but you. And that's what happened to poetry. Poetry, just had a precipitous fall from the sublime to the picayune. And it was taught, and I think it's still taught in the schools, as a kind of art therapy or something that will interest the kids. And the way you interest the kids is to say, well, everybody's a poet. You are a poet. And because if you say anything else, it's elitist or, and the thing is, no one seems to go back to the great poetry of the past and say, how did those guys or those gals do that? That is amazing. I'm ashamed to listen to something so beautiful when look where I am. I can't begin to reach that level. Or maybe I could if I really tried over a long period of time, or maybe if the muse inspires me, I could get there. But God, how do they do it? They just say, if you can talk, you're a poet, which is, I said in this essay I wrote called, what was it? Sing, See, and Know, which I wrote for you because I said, you drew something out of me, which was hiding. And when you don't think there's anybody necessarily there who's going to hear it, it's a little difficult to bring it out. But you heard it. It just takes one. And basically I said anybody to believe that if you can talk, then you're a poet is like to believe that if you can walk, you're a gold medalist in the Olympic triathlon. This is athletic. This is weightlifting. This is hard work. This is a mark to meet. And if people don't feel that, don't feel the ambition to meet a mark, go away. Don't write poetry. Don't waste your time and the time of your unfortunate readers. This is serious work here. So what I was going to do is make an example. I'm going to bring forward an example of bad contemporary poetry, and I will not use the lady's name because I don't want either of us to get sued. But I don't want to just have people go after this person and trash them, as they will if you don't watch out. But I found this person on YouTube. There's a number of videos on YouTube now where people are talking about how terrible poetry is, terrible modern poetry, and they have different examples of their worst poet. There may be more of those than examples of your favorite poet. But I want to start with a short poem by W.B. Yeats. It's one of his earlier poems. Greatest poet of the 20th century, I think, in English. And he had a fiancée, or what he hoped would be a fiancée, Maud Gunn, who was, a statuesque beauty that he wanted to think of as some aristocratic lady from some mythical Middle Ages, whatever he dreamt of her as being as his muse. Whereas she was on her way to becoming a loudmouth, strident Irish revolutionary, which very much disappointed him. But he wrote this poem to her. I'm sure it was to her. And it's a defense of her against her detractors. which is another thing that is not, man is not supposed to defend a woman, because to defend a woman is to attack her. I don't need your help. I don't need your protection. Get out of here. This is what we got now. But Yates could still do it, although he didn't get away with it with Maud Gunn either, because she did not respond. But his poem goes like this. Half close your eyelids, loosen your hair, and dream of the great and their pride. They have spoken against you everywhere, but weigh this song with the great and their pride. I made it out of a mouthful of air. Their children's children shall say they have lied. Whew. Now, what did she say to that? Well, very nice, Willie. Lovely poem. But, are you coming to the next demonstration? Something along those lines. Then you want to compare that to something which is, this is something that I didn't know about. I knew that poetry was getting less and less publishable. You go to some, let's see, back in the 70s, let's say the 70s. I've got a lot of anthologies from them years that my wife collected. And, you'll get, from Random House or from Scribner's, these are the most important this is the most important German poetry of the past 5 years. Everybody needs to know this to keep up with the art. Can you imagine that interest in poetry? It's go on. But apparently, there are some poets on Instagram who have got huge followings. And poetry publishers have looked and says, well, wow, look at the number of people following this person on Instagram or TikTok or something. We could sell a book. And so they're going back to poetry publishing. Again, there's a little renaissance in poetry publishing, but it's all because of bad poetry, not because of good poetry. Because bad poetry doesn't demand anything from anybody, either the poet or the reader or the listener. And so it's all easy. And people want to feel, for some reason, that they are poets or they have poetry or all this with no work, no transformation in their soul when they encounter this work of art. Just easy. So this is an example of the best modern poetry, apparently, in the United States. This is, the lady says this. I do not want to have you to fill the empty parts of me. I want to be full on my own. I want to be so complete I could light a whole city. And then I want to have you, because the two of us combined could set it on fire. Well, that's nice. So, she feels she's so attractive that she doesn't have to be, she can be rather repulsive in the poem and people will still come after her. Maybe that's true. Maybe not. Or maybe not forever. So there are people who want in life and in their poetry to live on the absolutely shallowest level they can, on the very outer layer of the skin. Just don't take one step closer to anything within, because there's nothing in there anyway, because there's so much sorrow and loss and devastation, terror in there that you don't want to mess with it. So stay shallow, and the poets will help you stay shallow. They'll help you stay on the surface of life, just skip along, and everything will be cool. And we have a renaissance in poetry publishing because of this. Well, meaning is tough, man. Meaning, society used to give us chunks of meaning, which was good and bad. Because when you have, meaning that's just been received automatically from society around you, it gets pretty, you don't have to struggle to make it your own. It gets pretty conventional. So, but there was meaning, there was the beauty of nature. We look at nature, what do we see now? Uh-oh, climate change, uh-oh. A species disappearing, uh-oh. Very hard to look at the beauty of nature, which is still there all around us, but we can't see it out because of fear. And then there's, human relationships, human love, the great deeds of great men and women, all of the things that poets used to write about. We can't touch those things. There are no great deeds of great human beings. That's elitist, or it's colonialism and racism and sexism, and you can't do that, and don't talk about that. And love of another human being? No, really. People are too cynical and too hurt to be able to even go there. Love of nature? No, it's all fear. So the big, and religion, of course, is another big chunk of meaning. That some of the greatest poets, all of the greatest poets had some relationship to religion or to God. But that's all disallowed now, because you can be spiritual but not religious, and spiritual means you're doing it all alone. All alone. You have no tradition to back you up, to inform you, to help you grow in the spirit and grow in the love of God. It has to be all alone. You have to invent it all yourself. And so we got to start with that. We can't just say, let these large areas of meaning come back into human life. They're not going to do it. Poet's going to have to start from scratch. And how do you do that? What I said in my essay is, well, first ask yourself what means something to you. What really matters to you? If there may be a lot of things that matter to you, but you haven't just pinpointed them. Like, what are you drawn to know more and more about, and to become more deeply involved with? Or what would you sacrifice for? What would you fight for? And as we used to say, what would you die for if you had to? What means that much to you? And some people are going to be able to find that. They sort of know what it is, and then if they're encouraged to look, they're going to say, what really means that much to me is this, or this. But there are a lot of people that say, search me. All I want is not to be in pain and not to die too soon. And if I got that, then maybe I'll have time or desire to think about something else, but maybe not. Who knows? But if you don't have meaning, you're going to have to find your hunger for meaning. You're going to have to go to where you're starving for it, where you feel your life is empty because you don't know what means what. But if you need meaning, if you're starving and dying because you don't have meaning, then it's got to be there somewhere, doesn't it? You're made for something that could come to you, because if it wasn't there, you wouldn't have the hunger. You got the hunger. So at least get to that and start there. Then putting it into words may help you clarify what might mean something to you, or the direction you would go in to find meaning. And meaning is not just a general thing. Oh, well, the universe means X, Y, or Z. God means X, Y, or Z. Human race means X, Y, or Z. It also has to do with the meanings of particular moments, let's say, or encounters in life, which may never come again. But you suddenly say, look at that. Feel that. And then you say, I can put that into words. And you get a perfect expression if you are good enough as a poet of that moment, that quality, which may never come back. One of the things the main thing, probably one of the theme in my essay, is something from Ezra Pound, the poet Ezra Pound, who he helped more poets and writers become what they could be. He was immensely generous. As for his own poetry, he's got great moments, but he's also kind of funny. He was doing a bunch of funny stuff that gave other people permission to break out of old forms and do something new. But he himself, you can't put him at the absolute first front of poetry. But for his influence in the art, he was unparalleled, just, in the 20th century. So he said poetry has three elements: melopoia, logopoia, and phanopoia. Melopoia is the music of the language, just poetry purely as music. Dylan Thomas says, altar-wise, by owllight in the halfway house, the gentleman lay gravered with his furies. A baton and a hangnail cracked from Adam, and something, and a dog among fairies. The Atlas eater with a jaw for news bit out the mandrake with tomorrow's scream. It's very hard to figure out what he's talking about. He actually is talking about something. But that's you got to go way down, dig to find that out. And it's even hard to see images in your mind, which is the phanopoi of it, when you're hearing that, because the sound, the music, or the funniness of his language dominates. So that's the melopoia. Logopoia is what the poet means to say. Mm-hmm. And phonopoia is just close your eyes, forget the music of the words, forget thinking about what the poet means to say, and just watch the pictures that appear in your imagination as you listen to the words. That's the phonopoia. Those are three elements that are in all poetry sometimes. So, the greatest example in English of melopoia is probably Dylan Thomas. Logopoia, various people. Phanopoia, I always say, Japanese haiku. Japanese haiku, if it works, you're not listening to the music of the language. The language so perfectly transmits the image that it just goes like a snapshot. There it is. And that's all you see. Well, also, there is a human being talking, that's there, who's saying something. And there's also the music of the language in Japanese. But really, because all poems have all three. But haiku is very heavy on the phanopoia. So this is something, it's a poem about poetry. And there's a lot of logopoia here. He's saying this is this. This is that. This works like this. This is what he means to say. This is called beyond pleasure. Gradually, we realize what is felt is not so important, however lovely or cruel, as what the feeling contains. Not what happens to us in childhood, but what was inside what happened. Ken Kesey, sitting in the woods beyond his fence of whitewashed motorcycles, said, when he was writing on acid, he was not writing about it. He used what he wrote as blazes to find his way back to what he knew then. Poetry registers feelings, delights, and passions, but the best searches out what is beyond pleasure, is outside process. Not the passion so much as what the fervor can be an ingress to. Poetry fishes us to find a world part by part, as the photograph interrupts the flux to give us time to see each thing separate and enough. The poem chooses part of our endless flowing forward to know its merit with attention. Now that's a very fine poem, but it's an essay. He's saying something. So some poems are heavy on, you're going to get drawn into, when he's saying something philosophical or something psychological, he's making a point, you'll hear that, but it won't get through to you unless there's sufficient melopoia, or the music carries it more deeply into your psyche. And it won't get through to you unless there are some images. And, this has only got like one real image, which is Ken Kesey sitting in the woods beyond his fence of whitewashed motorcycles. This was his farm in Oregon. He had a bunch of old motorcycles that he made a fence out of and painted them white. That's an interesting image. And if you go for meaning, you're going to have to, at one point, lament the loss of meaning. The loss of meaning. Don't know what anything means anymore. I remember my wife and I were driving Miriam Borkowski, a poetess in Marin County, who has since passed on. And she was always almost homeless. She would live in her car when she'd have a apartment for a little while. Then she'd live in her car with the kids. And she had daughters. And we were driving her around West Marin, the dairy ranches. And she was She was talking about agriculture, and talking about how important it is, and giving sort of an ecological spiel. And her 13-year-old daughter, Eugenia, says, stupid cows, And then she started to talk about, the intellectual life and poetry and intelligence. And Eugenia says, intelligence is stupid. And then she laughed. She said she got the joke. She laughed. But that's what people think. Why? What, it's the intellectual life, the artistic life, or as Allen Ginsberg put it in Howl, the whole boatload of sensitive bullshit. I mean, even then he could say the whole boatload of sensitive bullshit. This has become very hard for us to see a use for. But if you're struggling to desperately find meaning to save your life, you may not be laughing. You may say, if I don't find it, I'm lost. And if you can approach poetry with that degree of desperation and that degree of courage, then maybe you're ready to start learning the art. So, in fact, I've got a good example of that here. These are a couple of poems by my wife, Jenny. So, and people will write poetry also out of their desperation. They will write it to express things that are almost too hard to live with without being able to express it like that. That's what the blues does. That's what the blues is for. There's pain that is so intolerable that you can't live it unless you can sing it. If you can sing it, it becomes tolerable. If you can do it well enough. Her situation growing up was like this. This is called My Birth Dress. Let's see. As soon as I was born, my birth dress was put around me like an incubator. When I quit my kicking, voices accumulated within the room. These were the voices of the women who had made the dress cloth with insect shadows over it. There was snow inside the arms and legs of these women, but when they looked into mirrors, they could only see insects. One of the women had no neck, so the other hung my birth dress over her arms and said it was a necklace that sinks into the ground during the daylight hours. This woman always kept her arms and legs covered in the daytime. This woman is my mother. When I look into the hollow that exists between the nighttime and morning, I see only her. And because I was born backward, she can never see me. She remembers that as the sun went away and she went to her mirror and combed her hair while it was becoming wet. She heard my feet as they started to come out, and then her memory of me ends. Well, that's what she had to live with. So you see, for her, being able to express that kind of desperation with no one to talk to, no religious help, no help from friends or teachers, no help from family, because she was coming from a very abusive household. So you write that and you say, well, if I can say that, then maybe I can live. I can keep living. And here's the other one. This is what she did somehow, spiritually, without any help of a religious tradition, maybe with a little help from literature, but, without knowing of what spiritual practice was, without having a prayer life, without having meditation or anything. She did this. It's called the blood. The room around the wall is peopled and deranged. I must get away from the wall and go toward the tree that never has leaves. My body wrapped around it will be its leaves. My blood comes up within me like heat, and I am becoming the flower of the tree. I am sinking into my blood. As I die, my blood remains in the invisible parts of the tree. I can feel my blood forming and appearing within a time and space I can never know. So there's some kind of excruciating spiritual alchemy she was doing in order to survive and not lose her soul without much way to figure out anything beyond what she just said. But that was showing she could get through it. That was the next step in life. So, a lot of poetry does come out of desperation. But the sad thing about that is people say, oh, yeah, well, I'm depressed. I write a poem about how depressed I am. Boy, do I feel bad today. Sniff, sniff. I mean, you got to get out of yourself if you're going to write about your deepest feelings. You can't just write from me about me. You've got to write from some transcendent point beyond, some eye that sees everything. Then you can write about me, and it will be universal. Whereas otherwise, you're just one more person whining about yourself. And why should I listen to your whining? I got whining on my own. So, that's poetry, man. I mean, how many people just love it? You have to fall in love with the language, but fall in love with the sense of the language pregnant with meaning and say, I want to know. I want to know what's in that mystery. And if you are not listening to the great poetry of the past, you'll never get there. You need that. I was lucky. I went to Catholic high school, and I was taught things, I was taught poetry. You get a little Walt Whitman. It's always the noiseless, patient spider, or, oh, Captain, my Captain, or something like that. You get a little Emily Dickinson. You get a little something, something. Even a little E.E. Cummings we got. I still have my high school poetry book is pretty good. But I've heard now that the great American poets are not taught in school anymore. Emily Dickinson is not taught. Walt Whitman is not taught because, that's too much for these kids, and it'll alienate them, and they'll start shooting, whatever. They'll start acting out, or they'll be bored, or we lose the class, or no. You're all, hey, get interested. You're all poets. Say something. Write about what they always say. It's taught. Write what. How about write what you don't know yet? That's what makes it interesting. Write what you would like to know, but you don't know yet. But maybe if you get the writing right, maybe some phrase will come to you that gives you a clue to something that you don't know yet. That's, but people, everything is dumbed down. And so how can people love poetry anymore? They haven't even heard it to begin with. And, but I want to give an example, see if I remember this from memory. I used to. And what poetry can be. Lou Welch read this to me once. He just wanted to get it into my ear. It's got to get into your ear. It comes into your ear, it resonates deeper and deeper into your being, layer upon layer of your being, and it becomes part of you. And, in traditional cultures, the culture of Iran, for example, is still like that. People know all the poetry of the great Persian poets, which is one of the greatest poetic traditions. Most people have heard of Rumi, but there's so many others, Hafiz, and such and such. But maybe I should read this from the book. I don't want to just show off that I know it by heart and then make a mistake. So this is what Lou Welch read to me one night during our sessions, where he was transmitting to me the last that he had to offer before the date of his suicide, which was fast approaching. So he wanted to get it into me while there was still time, while he could still do it, before he either blew his brains out or became such a wino bum that he would lose the whole thing. So this is called Byzantium. Everybody's heard, well, not everybody. More people have heard this poem, Sailing to Byzantium. That is no country for old men, the young in one another's arms, birds in the trees. Those dying generations, at their call, the salmon falls, the mackerel-crowded seas, fish, flesh, and fowl commend all summer long whatever's begotten, born, and dies. Caught in that sensual music, all neglect, monuments of unaging intellect. An aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick, unless soul clap its hands and sing, and louder sing for every tatter in its mortal dress. And there is no singing school but studying monuments of its own magnificence. And so I have sailed the seas and come to the holy city of Byzantium. Sages standing in God's holy fire, as in the gold mosaic of a wall, come from the holy fire, purn in a gyre, and be the singing masters of my soul. Consume my heart away, sick with desire, and fastened it to a dying animal. It knows not what it is, and gather me into the artifice of eternity. Once out of nature, I shall never take my bodily form from any natural thing, but such a form as Grecian goldsmiths make of hammered gold and gold enameling to keep a drowsy emperor awake. Or perch upon a golden bough and sing to lords and ladies of Byzantium of what is past or passing or to come. So that's sailing to Byzantium. So that's very nice.
That was Yeats, was it?
Yeah.
Was it not?
That was Yeats. He's real good. But once you get to Byzantium, it's heavier. That was, I'm going to the city of beauty and art. But once you get there, and this is the way it is, the Sufis say, on the spiritual path. There's an earlier stage which is lyrical, and where the beauty of God draws you toward him. But once you are there, then you have to step into the fire. Then, the majesty of God and the rigor of God supervenes at one point. And this slow, if you can see through the many stages, you can see this in Yeats as well. That was sailing to Byzantium, but this is at Byzantium. It's just called Byzantium. I probably remember it. The unpurged images of day recede. The emperor's drunken soldiery are abed. Night resonance recedes. Night walker's song after great cathedral gong. A starlit or a moonlit dome disdains all that man is, all mere complexities, the fury and the mire of human veins. Before me floats an image, man or shade, shade more than man, more image than a shade. For Hades' bobbin bound in mummy cloth may unwind the winding path. A mouth that has no moisture and no breath, breathless mouths may summon. I hail the superhuman. I call it death in life and life in death. Miracle, bird, or golden handiwork. More miracle than bird or handiwork. Planted on the starlit golden bough, can like the cocks of Hades crow, or by the moon embittered scorn aloud in glory of changeless metal, common bird or petal, and all complexities of mire or blood. At midnight on the emperor's pavement flit flames that no faggot feeds or steel is lit, nor storm disturbs. Flames begotten of flame, where blood-begotten spirits come, and all complexities of fury leave, dying into a dance, an agony of trance, an agony of flame that cannot singe a sleeve. A straddle on the dolphin's mire and blood, spirit after spirit. The smithies break the flood, the golden smithies of the emperor. Marbles of the dancing floor break bitter furies of complexity, those images that yet fresh images beget, that dolphin torn, that gong tormented sea. So, the need to go into the fire. If you can't go into the fire, stay out of the kitchen.
Charles, I know in one of our earlier interviews, you quoted from the Quran a statement about the futility of poets and poetry.
Well, it wasn't just futility, it was the danger. And everybody, I read something to begin with by Jack Spicer. The poet is the punch-drunk, used-up old prizefighter in the bar who's taken too many messages and is punchy, literally, from too much coming, too many rights to the ear. So it is a dangerous art. And so what the Quran says is, shall I show you those upon whom the Satans descend? Now the Satans are the jinn, and the pre-Muslim Arabic poets usually said they were inspired by the jinn. We have a jinn-inspired poet, James Merrill, who won the National Book Award for his book, The Changing Light at Sandover. But it's all written on the Ouija board. It's jinn-inspired poetry is what that is. And so we know about that one. They descend, shall I show you those when the Satans descend, they descend on every such and such faithless one, something. Most of them are liars. But then it says what a poet has to do to survive being a poet. You have to do three things. You have to remember God much. You have to, remember God much. Do many righteous works. Remember God much, do many righteous works, and vindicate yourself after you have been wronged. Now that is a strange thing. And what is that? The last one, I understand, well, you have to be good. If you remember God, do your meditation, do your prayers, and do works of charity and works of, if required, works of heroism, and be a mensch, then maybe you can survive being a poet. But what's this? Vindicate yourself after you've been wronged. This is what poets would do. This is what poets have always done. They would compose satires against each other. You could see this in Roman poetry and all over the place. Somebody writes a poem and somebody else thinks it's crap, and so they write a satire of the poem, and then somebody comes back with a satire of the satire, and they have a big feud. So poetic satire is one of the poetic arts. The Irish were really good at it. They called these satires airs, A-E-R. And what happened is, it's like this all happened at court. And if there was two poets who were rivals at court, because a successful poet gets the largesse from the Lord and gets given golden rings and probably gets the women and everything, it works out for the poet at court. So if he has a rival, he may want to get rid of the rival. So he'll satirize the rival. Now, if a satire works, that rival poet will be so shamed that he will lose his standing in court. He won't be able to show his face. He will be exiled from society, or will exile himself. And more times than not, he would just go off into the wilderness and starve to death because he couldn't come back, because he was so shamed by the other poet, So, but the thing is, if you don't, the other story of that is if you would do a satire on somebody that doesn't deserve it, then red blotches will break out in your face and you will die on the spot. And it is possible that these things really happen, because this was in a place where poetry was deeply involved with magic. It was magic. So I know enough about the Irish to figure out what the Arabs must have been up to. Satirizing. And all, William Blake puts this so succinctly in, I think it's Auguries of Innocence, which is those little couplets, make up the poem. And he says, the poison of the honeybee is the artist's jealousy. That's it. And so you've been wrong. So the Quran is appealing to poets who know an awful lot, they think, about how to vindicate themselves after they've been wrong. But that's not what it's talking about. You have been wronged by a truth coming to you that's greater than you deserve. And so you are in debt. You have to live up. If you're going to write a great poem, you better live up to it. That's how you vindicate yourself after you've been wrong. Because if the poem is greater than you are, then it shames you and it diminishes you. And finally, that's why so many poets die young, because poetry comes by inspiration. If you're a prophet, God is inspiring you with something to tell the people, and you have his full support. Whereas if you're a poet, God knows what's inspiring. You just have your antennae out and you pick up these things from God knows where. And some of them may be truly magnificent and truly true. But if you can't live up to them because you haven't worked for them, it's a gift. You've worked in order to weave the net that can catch the poem. You have the language skills that can catch that truth that's flying through the invisible world. But you didn't create that truth, and you didn't earn that truth. It was just given to you free. So now, watch out taking free gifts from invisible forces, because you go into debt. Plenty of magicians don't realize that. They don't realize. So, vindicate yourself after you've been wronged. Live up to your vision. If you live up to your vision, you know, the score is even. Everything's okay. If you don't, you're in trouble. And that's just the way poetry's always been. It always will be. If you're doing real poetry, if you're doing fake poetry, maybe none of these problems will happen to you. You'll just never become a real human being. That's all. Speaking of human beings and what isn't human, I have a friend who said the following. I saw some poetry written by AI, and it was pretty good. Now, what's wrong with that statement? Is it just human chauvinism that doesn't like AI to write good poetry? Well, you have to know what a poem is. A poem is a statement of truth, feeling, reality, as experienced by and from a human being. That's what makes it a poem. It is a human expression. So if you think that AI can write poetry, then not only do you not know what a poem is, you don't know what a human being is. Forgot it. We are machines, that among other things can produce words. And so I'm a machine that produces words and they're kind of good. And then we have this other machine that produces words and they're kind of good. Yeah. Now, Lou Welch said, this is going to sound funny. He says, only poets know that words don't mean anything. Now, that sounds kind of nihilistic and like the things I was complaining about. But what he meant was, words don't mean anything. People mean something. Right? Don't let your words do your talking for you. Don't think because you got a big vocabulary and you can string words together, you've got meanings that you can, now play with. And this word means that, this word means that. So I'll put them together and I'll have meaning. No, the meaning's got to come from you. It's got to come through you. It doesn't come from you because you didn't originate anything. You didn't originate yourself. So how can you originate your thoughts and your feelings? It's coming from somewhere else. It's coming through you. And then, but if you take responsibility for letting that meaning through and for meaning what you say, then the words can come that will catch that meaning and you may really have a poem. But it's this is the struggle. Poetry is tough. Poetry's tough. And one of the sad things, talking about difficulties with poetry, W.B. Yeats claimed, he says, you can have perfection of work or perfection of life, but you can't have both. Is that true? What if you become, I worry about that with myself because as William Blake said, I pounded on the wall till words obeyed my call. And I got that. I got the words. I get older and older, I just get better and better. I'm not writing poetry so much now, but I'm writing prose, and the prose is getting more and more poetic. And boy, I got that one. But what about my life? My life falls short of my poetry. And that's true of many, many people. Dylan Thomas. Dylan Thomas. Let me find a little hymn. And I'll read you some of me at the end. But one of his well-known poems is Fern Hill, which was about, I should have put a bookmark in here. All my poetry books have fallen apart. This is one that's very often read. I think Richard Burton has got something reading it, and Dylan Thomas himself is reading it. You can go on YouTube and listen to these people. One of the best readers is Jeremy Irons. Man, does he do a great job. Jeremy Irons did a reading of T.S. Eliot's The Four Quartets. And if you want something which can really give you a clear idea of the difference between melopoeia, phonopoeia, and logopoeia, listen to his reading of The Four Quartets on YouTube. You can listen just for the music. You just say, don't forget about thinking about what he's saying. Just listen to the la-di-da-di-da. Listen to the sound. And the next one, you can listen to the poem and just close your eyes and see what pictures appear. Do you see the scenes? Or forget the sound, forget the meaning, just look at what you see. And then the third one is, he's trying to say something. It's a highly philosophical poem. What does he mean? Listen for that. If you can separate those three out and practice each by itself, then they will naturally come together whenever you read a poem or hear it recited or recite it or read it yourself, and you will see and feel much deeper into the poem after having separated those three and concentrated on them by themselves and then let them come together again. But so as an example of incredible melopoeia, and if poetry was just melopoeia, Dylan Thomas would be the greatest poet who ever wrote in English. But no, there's more to it than that. But this is Fern Hill, and you could say it's kind of a nostalgic poem about a farm he used to go to as a kid that he remembers. And he says, people may have heard this. A lot of people will have heard this. Now, as I was young and easy under the apple boughs, about the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green, the night above the dingle starry, time let me hail and climb, golden in the heydays of his eyes. And honored among wagons, I was prince of the apple towns, and once below a time I, lordly, had the trees and leaves trail with daisies and barley down the rivers of the windfall light. And as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns about the happy yard, and singing as the farm was home, in the sun that is young once only, time let me play and be golden in the mercy of his means. And green and golden I was huntsman and herdsman, the calves sang to my horn, the foxes on the hills barked clear and cold, and the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the sun. Long it was running, it was lovely, the hay fields high as the house, the tunes from the chimneys, it was air and playing, lovely and watery, and fire green as grass. And nightly under the simple stars, as I rode to sleep, the owls were bearing the farm away. All the moon long I heard, blessed among stables, the night jars flying with the ricks, and the horses flashing into the dark. And then to awake in the farm like a wanderer, white with dew, come back, the cock on his shoulder. It was all shining, it was Adam and maiden. The sky gathered again, and the sun grew round that very day. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light in the first spinning place, the spellbound horses walking warm out of the whinnying green stable onto the fields of praise. And honored among foxes and pheasants by the gay house under the new-made clouds, and happy as the heart was long in the sun born over and over, I ran my heedless ways. My wishes raced through the house-high hay, and nothing I cared at my sky-blue trades. The time allows in all his tuneful turnings so few and such morning songs. Before the children, green and golden, follow him out of grace. Nothing I cared in the lamp-white days that time would take me up to the swallow-thronged loft by the shadow of my hand in the moon that is always rising. nor that riding to sleep I should hear him fly with the high fields, and wake to the farm forever fled from the childless land. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. So probably it was Dylan Thomas that made me want to be a poet. Him and William Blake. I didn't get to write like Dylan Thomas, and he already did that. I learned some things from him. So poetry, it's pretty amazing when you're in the presence of an art that can speak to your thinking mind, to your feeling heart directly through music, and to the inner eye of your imagination. And all these are one. These are different faculties. I mean, the neuropsychologists can probably tell you what parts of the brain we're talking about, whatever, which is not very poetic, but but all of these parts of your consciousness are being stimulated at the same time. So you're being educated in a profound way, trained to feel, to see, to experience, to know on so many levels that they probably have not yet been enumerated. And poetry used to be the sovereign art. It was the central art. I remember I met the poet Kathleen Raine, English poetess, who was she was a great scholar of William Blake, wrote big studies of him, and her own poetry is quite fine. And I was going to see my wife and I were going to see our Sufi sheikh in London, and one of the dervishes, as the Iranian Sufis are called, although this guy was an American, took us to see Kathleen Raine. She was, she was we had sort of the last chance to have a true Victorian tea hour with her, and she was one of the last people who believed in the divine poet. Ladies, elderly poetry ladies of the past used to say, "Oh, divine Shelley," and they would have little poetry circles, and they would read these poems, which they would their hearts would flutter. The idea, and that was the last gasp of the sense of what the poet used to be. The poet, I don't know how valid this is historically, but it's got something to it. There's one of the big Druid orders in England is called, I think, Obad, the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids. Bards, this is the first level of becoming a Druid, is to master language, to be a bard, and to know all the lore that a bard would know. The bardic poetry, bards would have a vast memory filled with the poetry of the past and with different stock images that would relate to different ideas. And so they could compose poetry extemporaneously just from their memory, stringing together all that and the closest thing we've had to that in this country is a Baptist preacher, particularly a black Baptist preacher or someone of a similar sect who's got the Bible almost memorized. And then he starts to preach. As he preaches, he's hyperventilating. Jesus, Holy Spirit, give me the word. I'm here to speak your truth. Give me the word. That he would hyperventilate and get high, and then the Spirit would come and he would be able to verses out of the Bible from all over the Bible and string them together into this incredible contemporary, spontaneous poem, which is a sermon. That the great preachers would do that. So that's the bardic method. But the next level was the ovates, and the ovates were the seers, and perhaps they were mediums and whatever, and perhaps they were beginning to get into theurgy and thaumaturgy, which is using words to produce effects in the world, magically speaking. And then you get to the Druids, and they had all of that going, but at the same time, they were mature enough to be lawgivers and diplomats and whatever kind of leader the tribe required outside of the chieftain, and they had the knowledge. At that point, you could carry the knowledge of the entire tribe and civilization in your memory. We can't do that anymore because there's too much. But They could know the basic qualities of all the arts, agriculture, hunting, warfare, lovecraft, if you will. They knew it all. And so, they were the repositories of the knowledge of the whole people. So that's what poets used to be. And then slowly down and down, well, the poet and the shaman and the priest were the same at one point. And so there's a memory that poetry is so central. But now it has crashed so far. Poets who pretend to that position, to that function, are usually inflated maniacs and narcissistic madmen of some sort. Although, who knows, maybe moments of that can come back. But it's strange to live in the shadow of such a great tradition when most of it is underground now. So we could get eventually to some poetry I wrote. I wrote this let me see, I wish I should have got it down for people to see. This is my book on poetics. It's the prettiest cover of all my books. What poets used to know. Yeah. Yeah, it elaborates sort of the stuff I'm saying now. And then I've got another book called The Wars of Love and Other Poems, which I didn't bring to show you, but it's there. It's all on Amazon. And this is built around an epic poem. My first epic poem, as I said, was Pancrass, which was about, the United States and the doom of the United States. And it turned out to be pretty true, even time-wise. In 1967, I said 2 years or 50 years it will last. It was about 50 years. I'm not sure we have a United States or an America anymore. For all the fact that we now call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, or it really should be the Gulf of Trump. Really, I mean, why doesn't he go all the way? Have a little self-confidence, man. I mean, gee. Anyway, but we don't have national identity. And poets have always required national identity because they need a tribe or a nation to speak to. And William Blake almost wanted to create the kind of Britain that could hear his poetry. Well, he didn't quite make it. But he made it only insofar as that lyric from his epic Jerusalem became the hymn and did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green, which is a beautiful song. So he got through that much. I'm not sure he got or Tiger, Burning Bright, whatever that is. But he tried to do it. And the beats, Allen Ginsberg, Charles Olson, a lot of those people were saying, where is my America? Where is the America to which I can speak and for whom I can speak and to which I can give a voice? Kerouac certainly was doing that. And I don't think, can we do that now? Is there an America? Do we really want an America anymore? Or do we want to break up into our own little self-enclosed worlds? I don't know. So anyway, but I did one, given that there was enough of America to say, America is coming to its end. It had to be there for me to say that. And so this one was basically more about the totality of the human thing than just America. So it's called The Wars of Love. This is basically a fall and redemption cycle. And this is what I wrote because I looked at William Blake's prophetic works, the Four Zoas, Milton, and Jerusalem. And I read them all. I couldn't understand most of it, but I said, my God, I want to do one of those. So those are amazing, and over the years, you get to be able to read them and understand them better. But the magnitude of his vision was in your face, even if you didn't get everything. You said, that is something. And you said, well, I want to write something that big. So this is the last section here. So what this happens, it just shows, as William Blake did, it shows the human form falling. William Blake did that through the fall of his character, the giant Albion. The giant Albion was Adam and also Britain. And he fell asleep into a deathly sleep on the Rock of Ages, and when it was drowned in the sea of space and time. And the four zoas, or the four basic faculties of the human self, which were Rithona, Tharmas, Luva, and Urizen, which were, thought of the prophetic imagination, the affections, and the senses, something like this. Different basic things that go to make up a human being. They fell out of relation to each other. And each one tried to be it all. And they couldn't, because the wholeness of the human form was broken up. And so they were at war with each other within the nightmares of the sleeping giant of humanity. Wow, who's Albion? And then Christ appears and wakes him up. And how does that go? And then he says, "O Savior, pour upon me thy spirit of meekness and love. Annihilate the selfhood in me. Be thou all my life. Guide thou my hand, which trembles exceedingly upon the Rock of Ages." This is what Blake said when he had, to give his all to write these vast poems. So, this is the coming back from the fall in my poem. So, and it may get a little long. We'll see what happens. If it gets too long, it gets too long, and then I'll get tired first. Okay, in the cave of the heart shines a hot. Let me start again. In the cave of the heart shines a hot interior sun. Sometimes it is veiled by leaden clouds, sometimes by a mist of dull, tarnished gold. At times the clouds are muddy olive color, at other times the color of dried blood. But beyond the veils of despair and complacency, of shapeless intoxication and grim spiritual will, a fine gold sun is roaring with knowledge over an incandescent ocean. Heaving, how does it go? Heaving in mountains of divine energy, the tidal waves of the eons passing as we watch them, but eternal in the core of radiance, before whose face we rise and pass like voices. Whatever word is heard in that light stands like a pillar between earth and sky. So now the violet fear and the white fear, now the full beast driven from the heart, rising in front of us, and us knowing him. Open hell, seal not the door where evil dwells, stir the banked coals, the immemorial anger, the mirror-bound suicides, lizards on a red cliff at dawn. They flex the sinews of their wings, they take delight in their own beings. I say all will be pressed into service, I say all will be required to fight. The passive, the coward, the innocent will be trampled down unless locked in single combat with Antichrist in mountain solitude and stillness. Invoke therefore the war in your marrow. Call on the fight you were born with, that enemy whose lie is cut and tooled precisely to cover your single truth. Pick targets. Each man is alone with all men in this night of war. The conglomerate form of death stands guard on each human door, solid to the bullet and the chisel, like those cliffs in the Sinai in which our skirmishers discovered, still living, the imprisoned forms of men. The sky is roofed with machines now, a guarded perimeter to block out the angelic orders. The earth is filled with the limbs of struggling giants, locked apart in separate mirrors and cold branching corridors of time. They are the powers of creation, chained in elemental caverns when the human form was planted on earth, because man, when he fell, needed ground under his feet, the bedrock of God. But we have forgotten God now, and the rock is unsteady. Our foundations crack like parchment, they heave and shift like water. The mechanical chatter of demons, the acid of shattered images are our gods and our protectors. The wasp and the locust advise us. The spider and the scorpion guard our sleep. Who knows this? Who has the courage not to worship? Who has the courage not to worship at the feet of his own destroyers? Friends, I know you. You are those scourged by what you see in the crackle and hiss of fire that flowers in the rift of God. You have incontrovertible reason, proof to silence laughter. You are the face of the divine humanity driven to the margins and borders of the earth, weighted and crushed by the trust, till you release the burden of your heavy word to the pavement, to the center of the earth, if necessary, that the heart give up her dead. You walk through the cities of the grave and the high mountains with food and intelligence for your people. You open your throats to the messengers to give them a living voice. Saints take counsel beneath your ribs. You often offer your bodies to be the purgatory of souls you will never know. You are those who in your hunger did not ask for food and so became storehouses, who in thirst did not cry for water and so became rivers, who in nakedness did not flinch under shame, but suffered it, rejecting the cloth of the world, and so became a city for all people where no one is refused, but only those who know how to place their foreheads on the dusty earth can enter. You live in that year when each man and woman picks up their whole cross and walks in the terrible sunrise down the burning road as the structure of consensus reality crashes all around us. Torn free from the flesh of memory, stripped naked to mercy, gone beyond death. The scythe reaps, the seed heads fall, the harvest barn is hidden everywhere in the fire, and the wedding smoke rises, perfume of all love and murder, heroism, quiet secret work in the caverns of the heart, pounding the stone doors of those sacrificial priests who desecrate the human form to build the regime of Antichrist, gods of the New World Order, powers of frigid glamour and insane false hope and numb despair. Pour fire against their sanctuary, against the dragon, against the tower, glyphs of destiny strung like nets through the charged structure of the thunderhead, weave lightning into working knowledge, where the living truth sits mounted and armed in the region of the air, on the borders of the next world now shining into this one, in dream and vision more solid than a rock in the hand, to overturn their altars. Those blissful devotees, worshippers of despair incarnate, to whom love is a torturing fire. At the precise point where their pain and loss are most deeply denied, in the mouth of their wisest wound, these words are engraved, white fire cut on black fire, on the skeletal plasm of their nerves, and love is what we wish them. But how can they accept such a gift from the likes of us? How can they even know their need? They are inheritors of the whole world. We are nothing but inheritors of the earth. So, in the beginning, we are walking over a half-barren field that is the bones of the dead. From here, God is a tower of fire, vines of light rising in scales of granite and diamonds up his thighs of forests and cataracts, tangled limbs of giants in the hills, studded with 1,000,000 flowers, irises and poppies, vibrating in the wind of a precise and endless language. His belly is the ocean, acrid with iodine, moaning with great whales, filled with darting silver arrows of sentience, the tides of ancient feeling that empower the biological universe. While on the peaks of his mountains his eagles perch and soar, scanning the wars of his intelligence, the burning white sky above streaming with the rays of his hair, the black mazes of the night, the firing synapses of the stars. And from here, God is a man and a woman, locked in pounding embrace, revolving with eyes and fingers, surrounded by the archangels of their children, the lion, the bull, the eagle, and the man, planets turning in deep space on a solid wheel of light, crystalline chariots of the Almighty, shifting dimensions as music, the living shape in eternity of the human body itself, a wheel, where gulfs of fire and hurtling stones are succulent fruits on the tree of life, whose roots are invisible, beyond measure, beyond science, beyond time and space, sunk in the earth of Eden, whose branches, visible and invisible, are towers of vision, where the eye sees itself nowhere but at the back of the mirror, among corridors of radiance, torrents of vitality, arteries of silence, fleet mercuries in the metabolism of God, whose word is vortex, star, warp, magnetic flux, whose word is mouse, bear, bison, eagle, the guardian beasts, reverberating from the fiery shield of the angelic orders in space and light, sublime pen and guarded tablet. They who shield with their hands trembling human birds in the nest of the lone destroyer, naked before the vastness of God. And she says, I am black space hugging motionless swiftness. And he says, I am light pouring myself through space as music. And she says, I am the spiral void, the close grain of darkness. And he says, I am absolute velocity. Step once into my river, and you are motionless in the core of radiance. And she says, I am universe, black rose wounded with starlight. My necklace of children is strung on a bullet's line among these jeweled arrows of the night. I am the hunger for truth. I know all. I am the truth itself. I know nothing. We are the circulation of the living word, the eternal loud cry generating universe forever, radiating our ancestors and children throughout the 6 directions of space and time, from whom you've picked the loveliest of our daughters, the blue one, Spenta Armaiti, angel of the earth, to be your sister, bathed in the living furnace of the sun, named her as humanity's chosen seat in a 6-dimensional signature of eternity, where past and future 2 rivers empty their cargoes forever into the clear well of the moment, into a paradise found, lifted from exile, held between our 2 hands, alive in the crystal chalice of the human eye. The horn of remembrance now cracks the shell encrusted on the heart for 6,000 years, awakening the nations of the human dead from their iron sleep. The people of the tombs arise and have their say on the plains of Akira. We are those who lie slandered under the name of death. We have incontrovertible reason, proof to silence laughter. From palaces of torture, from 20 terms in the gray, damp, infinite dusk, we raise our voices and salute you, who still sit laboring in your dream. You living men and women, clothed as we were in the sweetness and the dignity of human flesh. We are the strength of your arms and your loins, the voice of your living memory. Speak us, man, tell our story. We've been muttering too long in our ruined halls, those narrow beds, the groves still barren of our voices. We've lain too long in the seed houses, the uneasy archives, the crucibles of sleep. And beware, the dead are hungry for those who will not live. The ones who die into a coward's dream we consume, we eat, and are not satisfied. But as you remember him, he will also remember us in our chambers of darkness, till the river of our endless dying flows east again, toward the rising sun. The giant of the human dead now rises into the flesh of the giant of the living, who awakens into eternal humanity, all sexual music constellated, no human syllable lost. His knee parts the Atlantic. He struggles, tears the earth. He speaks with our voices, looks out through our eyes, and his word is, all hells are hells of the imagination, because the state of mind which creates the sin also creates the retribution. So remember God in the eye of this moment and stand free from the fire. The seed of earth is planted in the kingdom of dream. The seed of dream grows up in the kingdom of vigil. The portrait is burned to give recourse to the mirror. The mirror is broken to grant precedence to the face. Whoever you thought you were has no place in that court, and this is the end of war. Then Adam, who is the human form, entered the royal palace and knelt in the shadow of the king. Here are earth's treasures, says Adam. And the king says, these treasures are here already. They have always been with us in the guarded vaults. If they had not been here already, you could never have secured them. If you had not labored to secure them, they would not be here already. Your work and your practical wisdom adorn our court. Here are the freed captives. The freed captives were here already, my advisors and companions. If they had not been here already, you could never have freed them. If you had not fought and suffered to free them, they would not be here waiting for you. Your courage and compassion make our reign illustrious in every land. Then here are wounds, the trophies of war. Here your wounds are healed. You never received them. Look at your hands and your feet. If they had ever happened in this world, you would never have known the honor of receiving them in that world. If you had shrunk from receiving them in that world, they would be here waiting for you in this world, every one of them. Shame before the face of eternity. So I rest in your good pleasure. We're getting close to the end now. No silence without truth, no truth without speech, and no speech without silence. The mouse returns to her nest in the tall grass. The eagle dives into the sun. In the roar of God's silence, the speech of his heraldic beasts is heard exactly as it is. In the heart of that silence, whoever listens becomes all word. The galaxies turn on the pivot of a forgotten name. Until that day, when the song of ancient starlight rises to the purgatory of Vishuddha Chakra, the lotus of the human voice, and pours back our stolen knowledge into the womb of the essence. When by the sun under our breastbone we remember the name of our origin, and rise dripping from the river of human language, and start emanating from the throne itself. All things return to truth, but not through time. Each moment rises in smokes of holocaust to unload its harvest of mercy or wrath, vigilance or heedlessness on the shores of God. Ages rise and fall like breath moving through the lungs of a vast human form, printed in stars on the black curtain of the sky. They breathe in mercy and live. They speak his name and die. And whether the harvest is all the love and fear, the labor and hidden heroism and secret despair of an entire planet, or the crop of a single instant, of presence or willed exile, the scythe falls, the grain and the chaff are separated only in this moment. We stand on the ground of judgment. Day faces night in the same sky. Paradise and the fire are near. The greatest beauty is the beauty of the invisible. Like a smell, it comes from somewhere beyond directions. You find it by being the place in which you've always known it. Layla, that's just what she's like. Her name has to be night, because the light of day, unless it falls on some mote of dust that thinks it has a name, is black as midnight. Night is Quran, night and all the stars. The stars are the book, but night is the mother of the book. She divests herself when the recitation is ended, undoes the strings of existence and drops it like a robe. When the lights went out in the great banquet hall where all the people I had ever known or ever would know were being entertained after dinner by the two black-faced Fukara directing the spectacle of death and resurrection, that was her. Ever since that night, I have been a slave of the unseen beauty. It is madness to cross the ocean, looking for the ocean itself, madness to find a direction that doesn't appear on either globe or compass, and then turn toward it deliberately. Such things are not done. But when night comes and the wind drops and the calm ocean reflects the mazes of the stars, why not leave the cloak of your existence on the deck of the ship and dive in your madness into the glossy black water that has carried you for 75 years on the strict count of your breath and reach the midnight sun? When I was a man, I had no self but God. Now I am the self of every woman and every man, one with all who walk the path of nothing. All those who have become nothing before they die have no self but I. I am the road the stars travel before the face of their Lord. I am a ladder seen in a dream. Angels ascend and descend upon me. My flesh is a highway of living intelligence. When the seven seas rise like sap through the bark of the olive changed into liquid light, there I will stand, neither the east nor the west. When God summons the four winds back to his chamber, calling them each by its name, I will be the body of that vast returning Psi. To visit God is to spend the night inside the sun who hears and sees without sleep. So shed the world and open the gates of dawn. The sun is about to rise for the last time, climbing the green balconies of Axis Mundi, the luminous steps, gathering in the fruit of what has been, storing away the seeds of what shall be, till it stands on the floor of high eternity, the Temple Mount, and prostrates itself before the throne of the light which does not set. So,
what a magnificent, fulsome masterpiece.
well, yeah, it is a masterpiece, of course, but it needs a world that would, who knows what a masterpiece is? You do. Why don't you see if you can become a head editor at Random House or something, and then maybe we'll get somewhere. I mean, you see, there needs to be, William Blake says this, what? You need both the prolific and the devouring. Now, in other words, he says the prolific would cease to be prolific, did not the devouring like a sea receive the excess of his delights. So the sea has to be there. The desire, the need for that poem has to be there. Then it will be recognized. But, fake poets since the 60s, since the 70s, really, I would say, have done their best to destroy the love of poetry in the heart of the American people, as if that's what they wanted more than anything, as if they couldn't or wouldn't climb to where you could really sing something that was worth listening to. And so they were so jealous that they dragged the whole art down to their level so they wouldn't feel so bad. Well, let me tell you, I think they do feel bad, nonetheless, because somewhere down in their craw, they know what they have done. So here's the poison of the honeybees, the artist's jealousy. This is the rancor that you got to watch out with poets. They can get pretty mean.
Well, you have found an audience on New Thinking Aloud. I think we'll see how our viewers respond, but I anticipate that you're going to find a hungry audience.
Well, good. And I can produce poetry. That was produced over many years. It took me 33 years to write that. And who knows what writing could come if the hunger appears again. It's like that essay I wrote, which I've decided I would like to make that available to anybody, let me go back to it, who wants it.
We can link to that essay in the description of this video.
Okay, it's called See, Sing, and Know, The Art of Poetry in 5 Lessons. And it's dedicated to you, Jeffrey. And the thing is, having been a poet who doesn't expect to be heard as a poet, because, I've lived through the disappearance of the whole audience. Because, it's all listening. The poet listens. The poet is not, I always say a poet is a trouvère first and a poietes second. And trouvère is a word used by the troubadours, and the writers in the troubadour and the courtly love tradition. It means, it's a French word, it means someone who finds something. Like when you say a treasure trove is something that is found, it's dug up. And so a poet is a trouvère in the sense that he finds a meaning that is already there. And he also finds the great poetry of the past, so he or she, and digs them up. And then the work begins. And then you become a poietes. Those are Greek word, which just means maker. Then you become a maker. But you're a finder first, you're a maker second. And but I've figured out pretty much how to teach poetry. And it's first is looking for meaning. And the second one is do that thing of looking at the melopoeia, the music, the texture of the language, the logopoeia, what the poet means to say, and the phonopoeia, the pictures that appear before your mind's eye, before your imagination as you're listening. Look at those separately and then let them come together again. And if you can listen that well, when you're reciting, when you're hearing someone recite, when you're reading something off the page, then you can start to think about writing poetry, if you're supposed to write poetry. But people start, words, that's good. I've got words, and I'm me, and I have feelings, and I got words. So let's just, I can take what little I know of myself and put them into the few words I know, and change them around and make them kind of interesting, and I'm a poet. No. Start with listening. You've got to listen. If you don't listen, you can't speak. You have to listen first. If you listen deeply to something inconceivable that is beyond you, that you don't know what it is. It's not about you. When you hear the mockingbird on a summer night, he's not singing about you. He's just singing. You listen. You let the songs that have been sung by the human race and the songs that are sung by the deeper parts of your being and by the spiritual beings we're all surrounded by. And let all of that in and listen. Shut up and listen. And let information, that's a great word. The word information means that which forms you within. Information comes in and it forms your psyche. It forms the depth of your soul. It informs you. It doesn't just give you a bunch of static and flotsam that you're going to have to get rid of later, which is what information is like nowadays. And it forms you. And so you have to let the deep meanings that are already there in the universe and in the spiritual world and in the secret parts of your soul come out, come in, and come out, come in, invent. Invent means something that's blown into you. You need something to be invented into you. And then that may draw something out from the depths of you to meet it. And once you can let that process happen, and you're not, I want to be a poet, I want to write stuff. Wait till the meanings are so overwhelming that you can't stand to hold them anymore because you've got to express them because there's too much meaning there. And if you don't start to express it, you'll burst. You need. So listen. Let meaning find you. Because look, meaning and wisdom love people who love them. It's somewhere in that great section of the book of Proverbs where holy wisdom herself speaks, and it's so clear that she's in love with those who love her. Here we get to the whole thing of the muse, and we don't need to go into that necessarily. But knowledge seeks out those who love knowledge. Meaning seeks out those who love meaning. It will just come to you. Meaning is floating around saying, does anyone care about me anymore? I'm floating around the human world, and is the human world going to continue? Because if I leave the human world, it will fall apart. But I'm still floating around because I'm hoping someone will care about me. And if meaning finds and wisdom finds that someone cares and someone is listening, it will make a beeline for it. It will come to you because it is so lonely. Just as you were lonely for it, it is lonely for you, and it will come and fill you. And, overnight, who knows? There's a lot of crap you have to get out of your system in order to make room for it, but it will come. And if you can receive that deeply, then the day may come where you can speak. But don't think, I'm going to start talking and, see what happens. Well, of course, all along we're talking. You're getting your chops down. You're getting your facility with language down. That's useful still to keep talking while this deeper process is going on. Playing with words, learning what you can learn about poetry and reading. Everybody's got to read read the great poetry of the world, all of it, in every language, going back to Homer and the great scriptures, and all the way up through the Beat Generation and some people afterwards. Just read it. Don't say, oh, I've got to imitate this or that. Just get it into your ear. Just get it into you. And, that process goes along with, the openness to meaning. Don't and never speak. You have to get good at talking too, because poetry is talking. Poetry is speech. Lou Welch always taught poetry is speech. And if you don't know how to talk, you're not going to be able to write very well. So that's there, but don't think it just comes. Don't think meaning comes from words. Words don't mean anything. You mean something, and you've got to find meanings that are worth your speaking them, and they're always going to come from beyond you. Yet your way of receiving those meanings will be unique, because knowledge does not say exactly the same thing to two people on two occasions. True knowledge speaks very particularly and specifically. And so there are occasions that you will be the only witness of some revelation, and that will become yours, and it will be your responsibility, if you're called to that art, to render that as intelligibly and as beautifully and as truly as you can. So it's not just meaning is out there and doesn't have anything to do with you. It's got a lot to do with you. But it always starts from beyond you. But it's only really born when it comes to you completely and becomes part of you.
I'm hopeful, Charles, that there are people out there aspiring to be a poet. If I were such a person, I would seek you out as a mentor.
William Blake said, what? In seed time learn, in harvest teach, in winter enjoy. So I'm now in harvest teach time. And that's part of the whole thing. You get this knowledge, and not just the knowledge that you stored up in your memory consciously, but you're in touch with all the knowledge that could be if people ask for it, even if you have no idea what it is yet. And that's sort of where I am now.
Charles, this has been a magnificent lesson in not only how to find meaning in poetry, but how to create meaning.
It's both. I mean, you got to set your hand to it.
What a joy, once again, to be with you. I've felt this way every time you've read your poetry for me. It just increases my hunger for more.
So many people really got good at it, but it didn't give them lives. It didn't give them a life in this society. And so that's the cloud always hanging over the art. You don't want to get where you envy Taylor Swift or something. I could do that if I was a girl.
Well, Charles, thank you so much for sharing your soul with me and with the New Thinking Aloud audience. It has been beyond words for me to express the impact.
Beyond words. Well, that's probably the best you can say. I mean, the poetry is so good, I shut my mouth. That's what Job said when God did those great chapters where he starts out saying, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the deep, when the morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy?" And he went on and on and on. And afterwards, Job just says, "Well, I thought I had something to say. I'll close my mouth. Nothing to say now." That's the best review. And talking about God, Jack Kerouac, we have to remember this part. Jack Kerouac said a great thing about God, and he said, "God is the only critic who cares little for style." You have to know that too. I mean, your sincerity, it won't make a poem, but it will make a human being, which is a bit more important. And there can be no poem without sincerity either. Well, thank you for dragging the poet out of me again.
Well, Charles, once again, thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, it costs in a strange way. The poorer you get, the more space you have for the generosity of God. So that's the way I'm going to think about it.
Thank you, Charles. And for those of you listening or watching, thank you for being with us, because you are the reason that we are here.
Book 3 in the new Thinking Aloud dialogue series is UFOs and UAP, Are We Really Alone? Now available on Amazon.
New Thinking Aloud is presented by the California Institute for Human Science, a fully accredited university offering distant learning graduate degrees that focus on mind, body, and spirit. The topics that we cover here. We are particularly excited to announce new degrees emphasizing parapsychology and the paranormal. Visit their website at cihs.edu. You can now download a free PDF copy of issue number 8 of the New Thinking Aloud magazine, or order a beautiful printed copy. Go to newthinkingaloud.org.